Good morning, everyone. Sorry we're getting started a little late, but life is hard. We're here to talk about Diablo Canyon today. So the Diablo Canyon nuclear power reactors in San Luis Obispo County, California, are the last two generating units in the state, nuclear generating units. Diablo Canyon is responsible for 8.5% of California's electricity generation and is the state's largest single source of clean electricity. Nevertheless, in June 2016, the plant operator, PacificGas&Electric, and other parties signed an agreement to shut down the Diablo Canyon reactors permanently at the expiration of their 40-year licensed operating periods, i.e. 2024 for Unit 1 and 2025 for Unit 2. California enacted legislation to fund the proposal in 2018, and PG&E withdrew its application for a 20-year license extension that same year. The intent at the time of the shutdown decisions was to replace Diablo Canyon generation with renewable energy. However, circumstances have changed. Fossil-powered generating stations have shut down. The West faces a protracted drought, reduces the availability of electricity from hydropower and highlights the need for fresh water. Renewable energy generation has gone up, but is inherently intermittent. So that raises concerns about adequate supplies of electricity at times of peak demand when the sun isn't shining and the wind isn't blowing. The North American Electric Reliability Corporation's Summer Reliability Assessment for 2022 indicates the potential for power outages in California looming large even with Diablo Canyon running at full capacity. In the longer run, studies indicate that achieving California's decarbonization goals will be very expensive without Diablo Canyon providing firm, reliable baseload power. California officials indicated that they may be rethinking the decision to shut down the two reactors in 2024 and 2025. You may be aware that there's an op-ed in the Sacramento Bee today, authored by Senator Dianne Feinstein, where she has expressed the opinion that she's changed her mind and thinks Diablo Canyon should continue to operate. Now, some people may say it's a coincidence, but the American Nuclear Society held a show of support for Diablo Canyon on Monday at this conference right outside this hotel. And I think those two activities are not entirely coincidental. Well, what's next? We've assembled a panel of 7 panelists to discuss the situation and the potential for keeping Diablo Canyon in operation past the currently scheduled shutdown dates. 6 of these represent stakeholders here in California, and the 7th was one of the authors of the 2021 Stanford MIT assessment of long-term Diablo Canyon operation. We'll hear from each of our panelists in turn, and then we're going to have a question and answer period. So our first panelist is Jacopo Buongiorno, MIT professor and contributor to the 2021 Stanford MIT report on Diablo Canyon. And Jacopo is joining us virtually. You see him up there in the upper right-hand corner of the screen. Jacopo is very active within ANS circles and was one of the key contributors to our information related to the implications of the Ukraine war on nuclear issues earlier this year. So, Jacopo, please take it away.
All right, thank you, Steve. I hope you can hear me clearly and you can see the slides that I'm going to share on the big screen. Thanks for inviting me. I regret not being able to be there in person. I have a hard conflict here at MIT, but I'm really delighted to join and tell you about the study and share my views on the prospects for keeping Diablo Canyon running. Steve, you made my life much easier here. I can basically skip this first slide. I just want to say that in its decision back in 2018, the CPUC found that the plant Diablo was not cost effective to continue in operation, that it was not needed for system reliability, and that its value for reducing greenhouse gas emissions was unclear. That was 2018. Fast forward to where we are now, and what really motivated our study at MIT and Stanford was the realization that a lot of the assumptions or observations that were made back in 2016, 2018 have changed. First and foremost, California has shown some real leadership here in setting aggressive decarbonization goals for both the power sector and the economy more broadly. These are embodied in Senate Bill 100 and Executive Order B5518. There have been a variety of studies, including a couple at MIT and Stanford prior to our own, affirming the need for zero carbon dispatchable firm energy to decarbonize the grid, particularly valuable as you drive down the decarbonization or go deeper into decarbonization. Steve already mentioned blackouts in 2020. There are some grim predictions that these are even more likely to come either this summer or in the coming years. Severe statewide drought. In fact, as I'll explain in a second, that was really the starting point for our study. And then public land preservation, the so-called 30 by 30 executive order that seeks to preserve public land for uses other than industrial uses or energy generation. And last but not least, the almost decade-long reassessment of the seismic hazards after Fukushima at the Diablo Canyon site, and the NRC finally determining in May of 2020 that indeed the plant can withstand the type of seismic hazards that are expected at that particular site. So the starting point was somewhat amusing. This was back in July 2020, so 3 months into the pandemic lockdown, Zoom fatigued, and I had a little bit of extra time on my hand. And I read an article about subsidence of land in the Central Valley of California. So literally the ground is caving and sinking at certain areas of the Central Valley because of all the ground water that has been pumped out to serve primarily farming needs. And so I had the question in my mind was, could we use the electric power from Diablo Canyon to desalinate enough water to basically offset the groundwater usage that is done by Central Valley? It's a very simple calculation, which is shown there. So if you were to dedicate the entire electric output of Diablo Canyon to the reverse osmosis plant, and we know how much energy is required per unit of fresh water produced, 3.5 kilowatt hour per cubic meter. You just do the ratio, adjust the units, and you obtain roughly 5 billion cubic meters of fresh water per year. Just to give you an idea of how much water that is, it's about 45 times the so-called Delta Conveyance Project, which is one of the means by which the state of California is trying to address the water crisis, essentially diverting an additional, even higher flow rate from the Sacramento River Delta down to Southern California and Central Valley using the California Aqueduct. That project is estimated to require about $16 billion investment. As I'll say in a couple of minutes, I'll show you in a couple of minutes, you can get a lot more water than that for a lot less money if you use Diablo Canyon intelligently. So the research question for our study, and I basically huddled with some colleagues at Stanford, with Armand Cohn at the Clean Air Task Force, and so we decided to launch a study, which was roughly a year long. A report was released in November 2021, and the research question there was, what is the potential value? Can we quantify the potential value of Diablo Canyon in addressing overlapping challenges? So not just water, which was really the starting point, but also grid decarbonization and potentially also the production of clean hydrogen for California. So since the report was released, we've done literally dozens of debriefs, importantly with the governor's office, PG&E, local tribes, TISL, labor, business association, and RBC, you name it, and media interviews and panels like this one here. I think it's important to underline, this was an academic study. The funding came from internal university resources and philanthropic donations. We did not seek or accept any money from industry. Just a couple of words about the team. The co-PI or the other PI at Stanford was Sally Benson. She's since taken a position in the White House at OSTP. On the MIT side, I was helped by John Linhard and John Parsons. They led the freshwater desalination and finances work, respectively. Justin Ober and Lucy Catalyst work on hydrogen, and then we were very much helped by 3 uber-capable PhD students, Isabel Bamika at Stanford and Andrew Bowen Quantum Way at MIT. So what did the study look at? Essentially, we perform a techno-economic analysis of 4 scenarios. The first is, what if Diablo continues to provide electricity to the grid, what it's been doing very successfully for the past 35 years. In this analysis, we use an expansion, a capacity expansion model for CAISO for California with hourly resolution to be able to capture the potential for solar and wind to provide the energy required at any given time throughout the year. The second scenario is the one where, as I mentioned a minute ago, at least in my mind, the study really started. And so can we use Diablo to do both electricity for the grid, but also for a co-located desalination plant? And here we use a database called Desal Data for the cost of the plant itself, coupled with some detailed engineering estimates, some vendor quotes. And we look at various sizes of these desalination plants. You appreciate you don't need to use the full output. You can also go for a smaller fraction, and of course you get less water, but it also becomes more feasible from a siting point of view. It has to be co-located with Diablo. The third scenario was electricity to grid and a co-located hydrogen plant, and then the hydrogen would be transferred throughout the state to help to decarbonize the transportation sector. And the fourth is what we call polygeneration. So what if we mix and match at any given time throughout the year? We have the ability to either send power to the grid or to the co-located desal or to the co-located hydrogen plant. In all these scenarios, our analysis has to include all the costs entailed by these different scenarios. And so in particular, of course, operating costs, fuel and operating costs for Diablo itself, additional capital costs, in particular, the capital cost that is going to be required for a new intake, which may be very much necessary to meet the legal requirements for protection of marine life in California, as well as naturally the cost of modifications to the plant to enable this sort of interfaces with the hydrogen and desalinated water plant. So very briefly, I want to give an idea what the main takeaway. So for the electricity only scenario, we looked at delay by 10 years, delay of the shutdown by 10 years, and then delayed by 20 years, and so going all the way to 2045. And the electricity 10-year delay shows that basically delaying that retirement to 2035 reduced the California power sector carbon emissions by roughly 10%, actually a little bit more than 10% from 2017 levels, and reduce reliance on gas, either in state, although the state position is that they would replace Diablo Canyon entirely with renewables, or imports from adjacent states. The capacity expansion model that we use allows you to calculate the total cost of the systems, everything including transmission, different generators, etc. And so we estimate a $2.6 billion saving with respect to 2025 to 2035. And then all of this, of course, would bolster also the system ability to mitigate brownouts. As we've seen in 2020, Diablo Canyon was actually quite reliably staying on during the brownout. If you go to 2045, the value of Diablo Canyon becomes even higher because, like all the studies that I mentioned earlier show, as you're really trying to chase down the last tons, so to speak, of CO2 within the system, having a carbon-free and dispatchable source like nuclear really increases, reduces the cost to achieve that goal. And so in this case, the system cost would be about $21 billion, and it would also spare roughly 90,000 acres of land from use for energy production, primarily solar. And to give an idea of how much 90,000 acres is, you see here on the right, that would be the size of the land used for solar. You still get to build a lot of solar and a lot of wind in the state, but this would be the delta, the gap if you keep Diablo online. And needless to say, the land usage of Diablo, as you can see here, this tiny little square in green, is much smaller. So let me quickly move on to the second scenario, was desalination. We found, not surprisingly, that the amount of fresh water that could be produced by Diablo would be substantial fraction, sometimes greatly exceeding what's required, certainly in the Central Coast, which is that stretch of coast where Diablo is. Currently, there are some critically overdrafted basins right there. And also, if you start moving that water to Central Valley, and we look at the cost of piping and moving that water about 100 miles, which is what it would take to go to Central Valley, you end up really producing a lot of valuable fresh water. And what's important is we've shown that it would be a roughly half the cost of alternative desalination, water desalination sources, generically located on taking energy generically from the grid. The table here on the right shows a quantitative comparison between our reference-based desalination plant at Diablo, which would be the same capacity of the Carlsbad, of the existing desalination plant at Carlsbad down the coast. And you can see here some of the numbers if you care about. So the cost per unit water produced would be $1,200 per acre foot, as opposed to $2,200, which is the current cost of Carlsbad. And we re-estimated these numbers all with a consistent methodology just to look at the delta. If you go to a mega scale desalination plant, there are economies of scale, so your cost of water comes down even more. If you look at the total investment for a Carlsbad style plant, you're looking at way less than $1 billion. And compare that, of course, to the Delta conveyance project is much cheaper. The third scenario was hydrogen. Here, the idea was to put a hydrolyzer, plant co-located again at the site, and the production that you could get realistically is of the order of 110,000 tons per year, which, depending on what projections you look at, could be up to 20% of Californians' need in the early 2030s. And here again, the cost compared to steam methane reforming could or may not be competitive. It's in the same ballpark, but it's certainly going to be lower than so-called green hydrogen produced by renewable. The last scenario was polygeneration. And so, as I said, at any given time, you sort of triage your energy output to the three products. And this, we wanted to, the way we quantified it, we said, okay, what is going to be the increased value of the megawatt hour produced by Diablo? And it turns out to be about $70 per megawatt hour, which is a significant premium over the cost estimated by us of $54 per megawatt hour, which includes the capital cost of the intake and other things that need to happen for the plant to be extended. If the price, particularly this value $70 per megawatt hour, is sensitive to the price of water in California, so if that increases substantially, then the blended revenue value could actually escalate even more to between $80 and $100 per megawatt hour. So we concluded our study by saying this is not intended to be a definitive study. The conclusions warrant a further consideration of extending the life of the Diablo Canyon plant beyond 2025. However, we feel strongly that the analysis was sound. We did a lot of sensitivity analysis, a lot of checking of assumptions. And so, we felt that it was a compelling case. And Steve announced that the article today, Dianne Feinstein endorsing it, and you probably heard roughly a month and a half ago or so, Governor Newsom also came out publicly saying that the state should reconsider or open to reconsidering the extension of the application. So I'll stop here, and I'm sure there will be questions when we go into the Q&A session.
Okay. Thank you, Jacopo. Yeah, we're not gonna go to questions yet. We're just gonna go through all the panelists, and then we'll open it up broadly for questions. That was a very informative presentation, and I know that the study, the Stanford MIT study, or maybe you call it the MIT Stanford study, I'm not sure. But it's very, very well done report, and if anybody wants to look at it, I encourage you to just Google Stanford MIT Diablo Canyon. It should come right up. So thank you very much. Our second panelist, Scott Lathrop, is a titʻu Yak tiłhini Northern Chumash tribal member and the Chief Executive Officer of the YTT Northern Chumash nonprofit. In his work with the YTT Northern Chumash nonprofit, he supports the preservation of YTT traditional culture, protection of the natural environment, regaining YTT ancestral homelands, which is directly pertinent to this discussion, by the way, and the creation of economic opportunities to improve the quality of life for the YTT Northern Chumash people. Scott?
Thank you. First, I would like to say that I'm very honored to have the opportunity to present today and also take an opportunity to participate in the discussion. Hopefully, the audience will have a lot of questions. We love to talk about our homeland. But before I do so, before we move on, I just wanted to let you know that my goal for the presentation is to do 4 things: introduce you to our tribe, introduce you to our homelands, share a little history and our connection to Diablo Canyon Power Plant, and then I want to say first time publicly, actually present our tribal vision for Diablo Canyon. So with that, you can see that we have whoops, there you go. Again, our tribe is called titʻu titʻu. It stands for the people of the full moon. And tiłhini is actually a village site which is currently named San Luis Obispo, California. And so that's kind of interesting, and we'll share some information as we go forward. Our membership is comprised of families whose ancestries dated to the Pacho Coast, and we'll highlight the Pacho Coast also, for well over 10,000 years. We represent the unbroken chain of lineage, kinship, and culture of the area. We wanted to especially highlight today our stewardship responsibility, or our stewardship and love of our homeland. It never ends. It's something that is in our DNA. We've been in that area forever. The early 1700s, when we had kind of an interesting experience with the mission system, there was almost a time where we were totally extinct, but we actually survived, and we see it that we will be there for the next 10,000 years. So the issue that we're talking about today is not just a simple 10-year issue for us or a 30-year issue. It's essentially a long-time issue. And with that, what I want to do is share a short little video with you, kind of introducing you to our homeland and why we're so passionate about it and why we love it. So with that, enjoy. It's only about a minute. We intentionally ended that video with our homeland, our stewardship responsibility to the homeland. And over time, as you get to this today, there's been a lot of interesting things that have happened to our homeland that we haven't not had the opportunity to be the direct decision makers or have that input. And with the issue of Diablo Canyon, especially in the last couple of years, whether we were talking decommissioning, sorry about that, there you go, talking about decommissioning, or the latest is far. Technical difficulty. Okay. We believe as a tribal group that we need to be in the middle of that decision-making process, and our voice should really take a very high priority in that decision-making process. So with that, I wanted to give you a little bit more history as far as our overall area. And the reason I want to point these village sites out is that it's very critical to us. You'll start down here. This area down here is called Sipatu. The current name of that location is Avila Beach. Some of you may be familiar with Avila Beach. But in reality, we call this Sapatu because that means the place of the whales. And if you Google Avila Beach and Google Avila Beach whales, you'll see some amazing pictures, just even from last year. The whales come back on a routine basis. It's very important to us. If you go on up the coast a little bit, which this is the entire Pacho coast, we come across a village site, titʻu, and that site there is very important to us because we won an award by the governor's office for restoration of that site. That has a big place in my heart, that site, because I can show you my lineage where I have grandparents specifically from that site. So that's why when you talk to me about the Pacho Coast, we are very passionate about it, and we're very much in a way of fighting for what happens in that overall area. The next little village on up, Chenu. The reason I want to highlight that is that that's exactly where Diablo Canyon was built. It was built on the village of Chenu. And I wanted to talk a little bit more, moving forward to the next screen, and give you a little bit of information about that overall site. In 1966, yes, that's a long time ago, I was 12 years old at that time. There's the site of Diablo Canyon prior to any construction. Pretty amazing place. It's kind of funny that when you take a look at that site, that we did not have any kind of decision-making factor or decision-making opportunities as far as what happened to that site. In fact, it was decided upon with an agreement between PG&E and the Sierra Club, who essentially decided for us, I guess, that this was going to be the site of Diablo Canyon. It was through a negotiation because simply Sierra Club did not want the plant in a different location. I find that very interesting because if you talk to the Sierra Club today, they are totally against nuclear power, but yet they were part of the original agreement for placing the plant in our homelands. I wanted to highlight the issue that this, again, is Chenu Village site. It's interesting that they call Diablo Canyon, which is a Spanish word, which means Devil's Canyon. I would have preferred that they would have named it Chenu Power Station instead of Diablo, but that's, you know, that's just my opinion there. I wanted to show you that 2 years after '66, when they made the agreement, construction started on that overall site. And the only reason I show you this picture is that that site was essentially denigrated, meaning there was burial sites that were covered over, which was, again, not a real good thing for the tribal community. But nevertheless, things happen. A lot of things that happen in life we don't have a lot of control over. So we have a before and after picture. And now we ask the question, is Diablo Canyon a liability or is it an asset? And from our tribal position, we would take a look at Diablo Canyon as more of an asset. We showed you a picture earlier of the starting of the construction. Our actual tribal members helped construct the plant. We have tribal members today that work at the plant. And we have a lot of confidence in the operation of the plant. We have no issues in reference to safety of that plant because we know that we've been part of that and we know what's happening out there. So with the way we see it as a given asset to our homelands, and we think that we need to be part of the decision on what happens to that overall asset. So again, I mentioned earlier that this is the first time publicly that we have a statement, and so this is our vision for Diablo Canyon. Whether or not that's going to happen is is in a lot of other people's hands as far as decision making. I want you all to know that if it was our decision, it would be an easy one for us. We'll be more than happy to make it, just send it our way. Diablo Canyon Power Plant, we consider definitely is a carbon-free power generator, and it's located on YTT ancestral homeland, taken without agreement or compensation, which is a little bit of a stumbling block for us. We envision a land-back path that will work towards correcting historical wrongs while promoting the continued operation of Diablo Canyon Power Plant. We envision that the continued operation of the Diablo Canyon Power Plant managed in partnership with YTT Northern Chumash people, simply because it's in our homeland. And then we also see a restoration of YTT's rightful stewardship responsibility of the Diablo Canyon Power Plant and surrounding lands. So with that, I'll end my little presentation. We're, again, real excited to be here to answer any questions that you may have. And so we just appreciate the time. Thank you.
Yeah, you can just leave that up there. Thank you very much, Scott, for those remarks and for the very powerful video. Our next panelist is Supervisor Don Ortiz-Legg, who serves on the San Luis Obispo County Board of Supervisors representing District 3, which is home to California's last operating nuclear power plant, Diablo Canyon. She is known for implementing California's renewable energy policy, developing and constructing multiple utility-scale solar projects, and later worked for the utility coordinating transmission and distribution projects for gas and electric throughout the Central Coast region. In 2020, Dawn was appointed by Governor Gavin Newsom to the District 3 supervisorial, I think I got that right, seat, and on June 7th, 2022, was elected to complete the 4-year term and will continue to advocate for affordable, reliable, and carbon-free energy for her constituents and for California. So Dawn is joining us remotely. Dawn, take it away.
Hey, good morning, everyone. Thank you. Can you hear me? Can you see the slides? Yes, good. Okay, great. Well, it's an honor to be here with you all, and hello from San Luis Obispo. I also want to say that, we want to recognize the YTT's tribal heritage here as well, and so happy that Scott presented all that prior to me coming on representing the county and our perspective. Okay, how can I get that? Okay, so the perspective from San Luis Obispo County regarding Diablo Canyon is that all decisions regarding this power plant obviously impact our county. And the community at large input is very important. Obviously, not only do we have our citizens working there, but we also have many stakeholders that are engaged in the operation of the plant and the overall safety of the plant, et cetera. The county must plan for all possible outcomes. So actually back in the day in 2016, when the decision was made to plan for decommissioning, the county kind of was taken by surprise a little bit. So that decision itself started putting things in order and scrambling, county executives and the electeds to try to figure out what was happening next. What did happen, we'll talk about here, but right now, we are continuing to work on the Diablo Canyon Decommissioning Environmental Impact Report until we're told otherwise. So we have a whole department right now that is talking about, the dismantling and the decommissioning of this nuclear power plant, the last nuclear power plant in California, in preparation for the agreements for 2024 and 2025. We have remained focused on the safety of our community and maintaining a robust emergency services. We do this together with the utility. We're very pleased with how things have gone. We have a good working relationship with the utility as we continue to watch the operation and seeing the outcome of this conversation. So the support for the Diablo extension exists here. In March 8th of 2022, a letter to Governor Newsom was sent by the Board of Supervisors requesting assistance with state agency approvals if PG&E seeks to extend operations, specifically the State Water Resources Control Board for the ones through cooling, the California State Lands Commission for the leases, and the California Public Utilities Commission having that reversal decision made. We support the efforts for carbon-free energy generation and keeping the lights on for our citizens. I think that's really, a combination of what all of that means for us. in regards to the decommissioning impacts, where there's broad regional impacts if the plant does go down. This plant has provided the highest wages in the region. Having the plant go down also means a reduction in sales, property, and unitary tax revenues, really impacting our school district. The counties and cities and school received a settlement funds under Senate Bill 1090 to mitigate and prepare for replacing lost revenue generation. That was done in 2018, and that has continued to be funded on an annual basis. So, what we have to acknowledge is that we are the first nuclear power plant and community in the United States that actually had a long runway of when the decommissioning is going to happen and impacts being mitigated. So, we've been fortunate in every which way you look at this and in so many ways. The long-term future. The Board of Supervisors has joined a multi-stakeholder group on a long-term vision for a world-class clean energy tech innovation hub with Cal Poly as a lead successor entity. And I just want to add here that Cal Poly works very closely with the YTT and recognizes their ancestral homeland. The county is already an energy leader, obviously, with 2.2 gigawatts coming out 24/7 out of Diablo. We also have 800 megawatts of solar farms. We have the world's largest battery storage plant under development, and we are one of 2 offshore wind call areas in the state right now, slated for 3 gigawatts of energy generation. That was also to be hooked up to the transmission lines that are coming out of Diablo. We have a substantial skilled workforce, an energy exporting legacy that makes our county a prime player in energy of the future to maximize benefits for our community as well as the state. And that I will end there and look forward to questions afterwards. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dawn. I appreciate your remarks about the value of Diablo Canyon and nuclear power plants to the communities in which they reside. I've lived in such a community myself, and let me tell you, nuclear power plants are very good neighbors. Our next panelist is Heather Hoff. Heather is a nuclear professional. She works at the Diablo Canyon Nuclear Power Plant and is a co-founder of Mothers for Nuclear.
Hi, everyone. I'm Heather. I work at Diablo Canyon, and I'm not speaking for my company here. I started Mothers for Nuclear with my friend Kristen, partly as a result of hearing the proposed shutdown of Diablo Canyon. So who are we? Mothers for Nuclear. We are mothers, environmentalists, and nuclear professionals. That's me on the bottom left in the control room at Diablo Canyon. And this is Kristen on top of the containment dome doing inspections. We care about nuclear because we were raised with environmental values. We care about climate change, air pollution, energy availability. They're the biggest issues of our generation. We want to protect the future for both people and the planet. So why nuclear? We were both skeptical of nuclear when we started at Diablo, had to ask a lot of questions for a lot of years, but after considering all the impacts, the technical feasibility, and the necessity, we now believe that nuclear energy is vital for our future and our best hope at combating climate change. What have we been doing? We are raising public support and trying to help change some minds. We like to talk about what do we all care about, what are our values, how can we work together to achieve it, and very importantly for us, this audience, how do we communicate differently about nuclear? We advocate an approach where we listen, we ask questions, we respond with empathy, we show warmth and caring and compassion, common values. We all care about the health of our children, protecting open space, having energy to power our homes and appliances. We want to share our genuine support for nuclear energy as a way to accomplish all these things that we all care about. We also want to acknowledge feelings and fears. Nuclear can be kind of scary. I had to work at Diablo Canyon for about 6 years, relentlessly asking questions. What about this? What about that? This sounds really scary. Why are we doing this? And there's a lot of things that sound scary about nuclear. You know, just at breakfast this morning, someone was telling me about their criticality safety, and I'm like, don't say that, it sounds scary. We have to admit that. The public hears these words and they're scared. So how do we combat that? We want to move from fear to hope, acknowledge the fear, say scary, that it's okay to be scared. It's not the same as dangerous. Nuclear provides hope for the things we care about: action on climate, clean air, land conservation, and reliable electricity. So the future of nuclear, I think, depends a lot on how we talk about it. We need more clean energy. It's obvious, perhaps more now than ever before, you know, with the situation in Ukraine and here in California. We don't have enough electricity, period. We're not even talking about clean electricity. We need more energy, so we need nuclear. We need all solutions if we're going to replace fossil fuels. And nuclear power, it's got a proven record. So thank you so much. I'm Heather Hoff, mothersfornuclear.org. We had some really great media recently also. That's another part of trying to change the conversation, sharing with the public. So check out CNBC. They did a really great article recently about Diablo Canyon. Thanks.
Thank you. And Heather, I think you gave a really useful reminder to the nuclear professional community about how important it is how we communicate, and not so that we're not just talking to each other in our bubble, but we're communicating effectively with others. Thank you very much. Our next panelist is Hunter Stern. Hunter is joining us remotely. He represents the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers, IBEW, Local 1245. He'll tell you a little bit more about that, but they represent most of the workers at Diablo Canyon. Hunter, please.
Well, good morning, and thank you, Steve. Again, Hunter Stern with IBEW Local 1245. Not most of the workers there, but we are the largest. We represent the largest group. There's a lot of workers at Diablo Canyon, and our members work very closely with Heather and many other PG&E employees there. It's a big and impressive group of folks. IBEW 1245 is the largest IBEW local in the country. We have over 28,000 members, and yet all those 28,000 people, of all the folks, and they work for utilities in Northern and Central California. PG&E is the largest, but there are 35 utilities altogether, as well as a few utilities in Nevada. But Diablo Canyon is the single largest place where our members show up to work every day. So it's critically important to us, and everything that Don said about the community and the folks in SLO and in nearby areas, you know, that's part of 1245's community too. And I actually want to start by thanking all of you, not just for inviting us, but really for taking up this cause. You know, this is, we fight for things in labor, and you know, we fight for a lot of things, but some are more righteous than others, and this is a righteous cause. And we really appreciate the society's interest and support, and we look forward to continue moving in the direction to keep Diablo Canyon open. And Jacopo, actually, I'm still going to call it the Stanford MIT study, Jacopo, just because I've got some old affiliation with Stanford. Many years ago, I was a soccer coach there. But without that study, I think people would have just not understood the full value and potential of the plant, and so we're greatly indebted to you and the folks who put it together. So it comes to me to tell you sort of the bad news or the bad parts of what's going on in the state of California now, and not because we haven't tried to do the right thing and develop clean energy resources and to move forward in this transition, but we're in a bad spot, and we're in a bad spot, and our members are many cases the first line of this bad predicament. California has a shortage of energy supply. It's expected, under the best of circumstances this summer, to be 1,700 megawatts short of what we might need on a given day. So there's every expectation there will be power outages, rolling blackouts of some kind. On the worst case scenario, it's over 5,000 megawatts. And predictably, you might be able to fudge things through demand response and other sort of more drastic measures to cover the 1,700 or so on a given day. But you can't do anything if it's 3,000 or more. People will be out of power. And people, we know from the wildfire problems and the shutdowns, the power shutoffs associated with wildfire risk, that people are really, really unhappy when they don't have electricity. And it's particularly tough on our membership because we're the people out there telling people that they're going to get their power shut off and then going out and trying to restoring them after it's come back. And unfortunately, when you don't have enough power and people get shut off, that's a problem. But to re-energize those lines, you have to go inspect them. You can't just flip a switch like we do when we walk into a room and the electricity, the lights turn on. You have to make sure everything wasn't damaged in the shutting down. So re-energizing takes a lot of time and effort, and it puts people in a really bad spot, particularly when it's already hot. If that's and that's what happens in the summer here in California. So the state is I think appropriately concerned about the near-term future. And of course, this is all with Diablo Canyon still running. This summer, next summer, these shortages are expected, and those two units are still there, providing key and large amounts of electricity that are critical to the state. So I think Steve, in his intro, said it best when he said circumstances have changed. They've changed drastically since 2016, and the wildfire and climate change and the impacts in the state, the drought is part of that, but other aspects as well have accelerated these changes, and it's put our members at greater risk, frankly, just doing their job every day. But it's really putting people and customers and people that our members serve at greater risk. And so we are very much committed to keeping Diablo Canyon open and having it run as long as we need it to run to help both with the transition, to maintain the electric supply as best we can, and ensure everybody has electricity. I mean, the level of dependence and people's need for electric service today, compared to even 15 years ago, is drastically different. And as I say, we hear it from people when they don't have electricity for whatever reason. And it is not pleasant, and at times it's even dangerous for our members. So we are keen to keep Diablo Canyon open. We look forward, as I said earlier, to continuing to work with you and any other groups that are so determined. And we appreciate the chance to let people know where 1245 is and why we're there. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Hunter. And I'll just point out something that's probably obvious, but Hunter represents, and his union represents nuclear professionals, not just here, but throughout the country. And we have a long record at ANS of working with and supporting organizations like IBEW that support nuclear professionals, which is what we're all about too. Our next panelist is Dr. Gene Nielsen, Californians for Green Nuclear Power. Gene earned his PhD in radiation biophysics in 1984 from SUNY Buffalo. And while he marched against nuclear power as a grad student, we're going to forgive him. He subsequently learned that nuclear power is a national treasure. In support of continued operation of the Diablo Canyon power plant beyond 2025, he's provided over 20,000 hours of his time as CGNP's legal assistant since late 2015. Gene?
Thank you, Steve. I'm Gene Nielsen. I have a PhD in radiation biophysics, and I'm going to be talking about nuclear power's role in supporting California's grid reliability. Governor Newsom's political future depends on a reliable California power grid, and that means no rolling blackouts. Diablo Canyon is a large, reliable, zero-emission baseload generator economically supplying 24/7 about 10% of California's in-state generation day and night. Wind or calm, rain or flood. Comparably sized San Onofre nuclear generating station, or SONGS, provided another 10% until SONGS was needlessly shut down at the end of January 2012. In order to keep California's power grid stable, similarly reliable generation replaced SONGS. Some of the replacement generation was from increased use of in-state natural gas. Almost all of the remainder was from coal-fired imports. Hidden behind the California legal euphemism, unspecified imports, that was created in 2009. In all cases worldwide where nuclear power plants have been retired, they've been replaced with fossil-fired generation, increasing air and, in the case of coal, water pollution. Since 2016, CGNP has led a legal fight to keep Diablo Canyon open by being the sole adverse intervener before the California Public Utilities Commission in a number of proceedings. We've generated thousands of pages of written testimony. CGNP has also opposed increased fossil fire generation before the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission and is part of coalitions advocating for continued safe operation of other nuclear power plants, such as the Indian Point Energy Center. So here's a book that I recommend everybody to read, Shorting the Grid. It offers a cogent explanation from a power industry professional about the problems facing regional transmission organizations, or RTOs, serving a large portion of the nation, including California. Meredith said, in the near future, rolling blackouts may become more common in many RTO areas. This book is about why this will happen and what we can do to prevent those blackouts. RTOs have also failed to provide the economic benefits that proponents claimed would occur. Nationwide, RTO power is billions per year more expensive and less reliable than in locations with state-regulated, vertically integrated electric utilities. This is a great quote. Show me the incentive and I'll show you the outcome, from Charlie Munger. He is shown in this picture on the left. He's Warren Buffett's right-hand man. Warren Buffett stands to reap big profits from Berkshire Hathaway Energy if Diablo Canyon shuts down in 2025. In RTOs, the incentives are to provide unreliable, just-in-time power. Meredith observed that in RTOs, there is no agency responsible for reliability. So reliability suffers. Ratepayers pay more for unreliable power. In vertically integrated markets, state regulators levy large fines against utilities if power isn't reliable. Now, this is a surprising observation. Near misses are the most lucrative feature of ISOs or RTOs. It is a feature, not a bug. And I'll provide an illustration from the 2021 bootleg fire in Oregon later in my talk. So what we're seeing here is the lead peak load history for the California Independent System Operator. And we can see two peaks at about 50,000 megawatts, one in 2006 and the second in 2017. So that one in 2006 was a record peak. The lights stayed on. After SONGS was closed in 2012, imported power was used more frequently. That works when imports are available. Thus, in 2017, Diablo Canyon and imported power kept the electricity flowing. However, in 2020, California had rolling blackouts when more power was required at a time when there was a shortage of imports. Thus, the probability of rolling blackouts will increase if Diablo Canyon is closed in 2025. So this is the most important slide. We've excerpted some history of what's happened, and this column here is going to be the most important. That's stage 3 emergencies, also known as rolling blackouts. And let's review what happened. During the Enron crisis in California in 2000 to 2001, many firms worked to create scarcity conditions for the California power grid. The result was 46 flex alerts, which are the lowest level of concern. There were 101 stage 2 emergencies with rolling blackouts imminent, and finally, there were 39 stage 3 emergencies with rolling blackouts. The economic harms of those rolling blackouts in 2000-2001 is estimated between $200 to $400 billion in lost productivity. The political consequence was that California Governor Gray Davis was recalled in 2003, ending his career as a politician. In 2020, for the first time in 19 years, there were rolling blackouts on Governor Newsom's watch. What do you think will happen to Governor Gavin Newsom if there are rolling blackouts if Diablo Canyon closes as planned in 2025? So now we're going to look at a near miss, CAISO Stage 2 emergency caused by the bootleg fire on the evening of Friday, July the 9th, 2021. One way to look at near misses is to look at something called locational marginal prices, or pricing contours. And they are available for everybody to see. Under conditions of scarcity by the economic law of supply and demand, prices at nodes will increase. There was an extreme example in another state, Texas. In 2021, the Texas polar vortex. Hotel pricing nodes rose as high as $9,000 per megawatt hour, or $9 per kilowatt hour, considerably more than California retail prices of 30 to 40 cents per kilowatt hour. Oh, yes, I do. Oops. Sorry, oops, nope, near miss. Well, anyway, we'll get there. As will be seen in the next few slides, the stage 2 emergency, some California hotel prices were nearly $600 per megawatt hour during the hour that power was most in demand. So here's our chronology, and we're looking in particular at the time between 2:05, when there was a grid warning, this fire threat to the transmission system, and only about 4.5 hours later, we had a grid emergency, loss of transmission resources due to fire. This is going to be happening a lot more. It's a West-wide issue. Without abundant in-state baseload power, the California power grid can quickly develop emergency conditions. So now this is a little bit hard to see, but this is a summary of the power system that moves most of the power in California. And up here at the top is Path 66, which consists of 3 parallel 500 kilovolt lines, 2 through Malin and 1 through Captain Jack substation. And those 3 lines bring about 5,000 megawatts. That number is going to be important. 5,000 megawatts into California when it's available. 1 or more of those lines were shut down on the evening of July the 9th to protect those circuits from damage from either smoke-induced arcing to ground at 500 kilovolts or crossed insulators that became sooted. So we're going to look at its evolution now. So at 5:07 p.m., whoops, blast it. 5:07 p.m., we had $95.15 per megawatt hour shown. Let me see if I can get this to go back. Whoops, it's going forward. Oh well, technology, what fun it is. So we have it at 6:40 p.m., what's happened? whereas this number was shown in the, on the previous slide. There was an accurate value there. Very mysteriously, when the grid starts to go sideways, those numbers go to zero. So again, thank you for taking it back. $95.15 here when the system is starting to show trouble. And these little colored dots, which are tied to this color scale here, show that things are starting to be troublesome. And you can do this yourself. You go to the CAISO website, you go to today's Outlook, you go to prices, and choose real time, and you'll see this very important. This is really what's called a price contour map, and thousands of nodes are shown here. Here's California, here's Nevada, and then very importantly, we go into Wyoming here. Now, notice that the Wyoming dots are all blue, which means there's an abundance of power there, but you got to get it to California. And so then we're going to go back and look at what happens when you have a fire. Now you notice that all those nice colorful dots are now one color in Nevada and California. But look, over in Wyoming, they're still blue because you can't get that power from here to here. Price contour maps show us when a grid is preparing to fail. And here we have, this is before the grid emergency was declared. We're already up to $412.20 per megawatt hour in one of the nodes in Northern California. We have the stage 2 emergency at 648, and now when we look, we see the prices have gone up. Yep, it still shows zero there, but we've got a sea of maroon here. And it stays that way for the next hour. So in conclusion, my remarks have confirmed the important role that Diablo Canyon's reliable and abundant power production, about 5 Hoover dams annually, plays in providing always-on power for California's huge economy. I haven't had time to explain that wind, water, solar approaches asserted by anti-nuclear power advocates such as Stanford's Mark Z. Jacobson have no fact foundation. I provided summary reliability statistics showing California's power grid is already less reliable after the NEDA's closure of songs in January 2012, despite the expenditure of tens of billions of dollars on inherently unreliable power generation technologies. Governor Newsom must understand this. We hope he does. I've also shown how LMP price maps provide warnings of imminent grid failure. I've heard Isabel Bamika talk about the importance of keeping Diablo Canyon open. She will provide an excellent conclusion to this session. Thank you.
Thank you, Gene. Thank you, Gene. You drilled down and showed us sort of the anatomy of a power shortage, and Heather referred earlier to things that are scary, and I would say that that kind of falls into that category for me anyway. Our last panelist is Isabel Bamika, who's founder of Isodope and Save Clean Energy, and who has been working tirelessly on behalf of Diablo Canyon.
Thank you guys for having me here. My name is Isabel, also known as Isodope. And I make videos, some would say weird videos, to talk about nuclear power and why we needed to solve climate change, energy inequality, and create a future of prosperity. I've been involved in the movement to save Diablo Canyon for the past 2 years, in which we organized the most successful pro-nuclear rally in California. All the people on this panel were there. And I would like to start by acknowledging that the land on which Diablo Canyon sits carries the heritage and culture of the indigenous people of San Luis Obispo County, the titʻu, tiłhini, Northern Chumash. We honor the indigenous people's ancestral connection to these lands and recognize their rightful land stewardship responsibility. We heard from Scott, and I want to highlight that Scott's support and that of other members of the tribe is essential in this effort to keep Diablo Canyon operating. About 2 years ago, as I started looking into existing nuclear plants and the ones that were supposed to be shut down prematurely, I came across Diablo Canyon. It sits on a bluff in the beautiful coast of San Luis Obispo, and I had the honor of visiting earlier this year with Heather, and I have to say it is shockingly beautiful. The nature around it is truly stunning. And as many of you here know, Diablo Canyon is so much more than California's last nuclear power plant. I would actually say it is the most politically relevant plant in the United States. California is obviously known as a leader in the fight against climate change, and Diablo Canyon, as the state's largest source of not only clean electricity, but electricity in general, should be at the center of any serious decarbonization strategy. The twin reactors could easily keep splitting atoms for another 20 or even 40 years. But as we heard here today, a decision was made in 2016, and they're being closed by 2025, way before its time. So the more I read about why this plant was being shut down, the more I realized it was purely politically motivated. At the time I was learning about Diablo Canyon, I experienced firsthand California's blackouts, a problem that's obviously just getting worse. And the memory of the orange skies caused by the increasingly common wildfires, which are a consequence of climate change, was still in my mind at the time. So I thought to myself, California is obviously in a climate crisis. It's also in an obvious energy crisis. The situation today is completely different than when the decision to shut down the plant was made. So why is there no public discussion about keeping it open? I started calling all the big pro-nuclear organizations, and call after call I got the same responses. Yeah, it's a done deal. Saving nuclear power plants is just really hard. Don't even waste your time. And so I called Paris Wines from Stand Up for Nuclear and Mark Nelson from Radiant Energy Fund, and we began a weekly call with people who had never given up on Diablo Canyon, including Heather Hoff. In the years since, a lot has happened. Obviously, the study by MIT first and Stanford came out, highlighting the importance of keeping Diablo Canyon open to achieve California's clean energy goals. But even beyond that, to save the state billions of dollars in energy systems and to help prevent blackouts. The Secretary of Energy has publicly called on California to keep Diablo Canyon open, and we started seeing public opinion shift. A recent poll by Data for Progress, commissioned by Carbon Free California, has shown strong support with as many as 58% Californians and a striking 74% of San Luis Obispo County voters, indicating support for the continued operation of the plant. Today, Senator Dianne Feinstein published an op-ed in support of keeping the plant open. So here we are, 2 years later, after I started my journey to learn more and help save Diablo Canyon, and what seemed impossible now seems feasible and maybe even likely. So why am I telling you all of this? It's not to brag or claim I had some foresight. I didn't have any more information than everybody else in this room does. But what I did know is that since the decision was made to shut down Diablo Canyon, the world had completely changed. And that although, yes, maybe it is hard to reverse a decision, it can't be that hard. You know what's hard? Going to the moon, landing a rover on Mars, or even just fully replacing the output of a nuclear power plant with renewables and batteries in less than 2 years. So do not tell me that keeping an existing nuclear power plant that has been operating safely, employing thousands of people, and making clean electricity for decades is harder than that. It's obvious at this point that keeping Diablo Canyon open beyond 2025 is the right call, not just for the city of San Luis Obispo and California, but for the world. So what we need now is really just courage and action. Courage to stand up for what's right. And what we need now is people realizing that, yes, we actually can. So I'd like to invite all of you here today to play your part in helping save Diablo Canyon. It can be as small as talking to your family and friends and explaining to them the importance of this plant. You can write letters to the editor, or you can call your legislators. The time to make a difference is now. We have the public, the scientific community at large, and even the federal government's support. Let's keep fighting, because it is not a done deal until it's done. Thank you.
Thank you, Isabel. I think you really helped put things in proportion there with your remarks. Great job. So I want to just speak to our audience now. You may have noticed that there are microphones set up in this room, and this is your opportunity to come forward and ask questions of any or all of our excellent panelists. And I see I've got a taker over there right now. Please identify yourself and ask your question.
I'm William Schoenwerk. I live in Los Angeles, and you really don't have to do any studies. Just go on the Cal ISO website, and it keeps track of carbon emissions since 2016, and it basically has shown there's been no significant reduction, which means the wind and solar are basically useless.
Well, thanks for that observation. I don't think we at ANS characterize wind and solar as useless, but we really do see the value in nuclear energy. Dr. Hashemian.
Thank you, sir. I'm Harsh Hashemian. So I was going to ask a question from every one of you. What is your best guess and best chances of Diablo Canyon surviving, percentage-wise? 50% chance, 90, or 5? Starting with Steve.
Anybody want to handicap that? I think that's what I think Hosh might be wanting to go over to Las Vegas and place a bet. So Heather, jump on
Go
that.
ahead, Heather.
People ask me that a lot, and I say, I have no idea. It doesn't really matter what I think. It's the right thing to do, and I'm going to keep fighting for it no matter how hard I think it is.
Isabel.
I would say it went from being maybe 25% to being 67%. I don't know why the precision of the numbers, but I'm just going to throw this out there. I think that with the governor's support and more people coming forward, it is obviously the chances are increasing. The need for it is obvious, and it's been obvious for a while, but the political, it was like we were lacking political support, but now we have that, so the chances are increasing.
And in my experience, working to first help found and then doing lots of work for Californians for green nuclear power, when the closure plan was announced in 2016, I thought our chances were about 0. Wow. And what's happened since then is it's kind of like a snowball going down a hill, and it's getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And I agree with what Isabel's number is. That's about where mine was.
Very good. Yes, sir.
Well, I would take a different approach, probably be more optimistic, because I believe it's going to happen. So I would rate it very high.
Good.
Because when you take a look at all the politics that are happening out there and what's happening with energy in general, and people start to learn more about it, they'll understand that it's the right thing to do. And it's my philosophy, and I want to say native thinking philosophy, that if it's the right choice, it's never too late, all the way down to the final hour. If that's the right thing to do, it's never too late to make that change. And so I guess if I'm going to Vegas, I'm putting everything on red, you know.
Very good.
And I would also add, if people need help making the decision, just check with us. We can help you make that decision.
Very good. Steve?
Any of you on the video want to chime in on the odds making or not? Don't feel compelled.
Well, I'll add something. We have sat down and we did this last fall to try and determine or map out all the different steps that would need to occur. And so I agree with everything that's been said by each of the panelists so far. But you know, we start out at zero, and I think we're more like 35 to 40% of success. There needs to be a couple of big steps yet before we get toward that, you know, 2/3 success. But I think, you know, I agree that there is both momentum and awareness that there wasn't even 5 months ago. And I think it started with Don, the letter that Don helped put together with the Board of Supervisors, and some other information that we were able to share with folks in Sacramento about where things were, or where things would be if we can't extend these units.
Very good, thank you.
And I would add that I want to thank both the perspective from the MIT study and Stanford study in regards to what that meant, what a powerhouse study that was when we look at where we are as a state, you know, locally, regionally. We talk about water, we talk about the energy generation need. So that's one thing I'm very grateful for. I think the other thing is the isodope, you know, Isabel's approach and really bringing forth the young people. You know, those numbers as far as public awareness and the importance to political people about their voters and how they feel, I think is really critical. And I think that's where we're going to see more of this momentum increase as we go into November, and we give really clear signs about what we want. So I'm hopeful.
What's your percentage, Supervisor?
I'm very optimistic being a politician, so I'm going to say I have 100%.
Right.
Wow.
Oh, that's great.
That's right.
Jacopo, can you follow up on that?
Oh, Steve, I'm not going to fall into the trap of quantifying percentages. I think it's still a very long shot for the reasons that Hunter said, but I'm also incurably optimistic. We're in a much better place now than we were a year ago, and I get re-energized every time there is a high-profile expression of support like today's Senator Feinstein. I think that's fantastic. We need more of that, and I know behind the scenes there are a lot of people that are working towards that. So let's collectively be optimistic. I think it's looking good.
Very good. Thank you very much. Thanks.
Yes.
I'm Aziz Simon with Thermal Engineering International. We are a manufacturer of heat transfer equipment for power plants. And actually, we are the OEM of some of the feed water heaters and then other heat exchangers at this plant. My question is about PG&E's position. Can anybody in the panel say where PG&E stands for this?
That's an excellent question, and I think I'm going to, again, open this up for the panel to, well, let me just say, just to start things off, you know, PG&E entered into an agreement that involved shutting the plant down at the end of its operating license period. And so they are party to a legal agreement to do that. And so that somewhat circumscribes what they might say and do. Now, having said that, I'll open it up to our panel. Does anybody want to say anything? I know it's probably a tough one for you to take, Heather, so maybe somebody else wants to jump on that grenade.
I can say a few words about that. In addition to representing the tribal group, I also sit on the PG&E's decommissioning engagement panel. And they have been very consistent to say over and over again that they are going to be taking the direction of the state as far as the state's energy policy. So they're very much right to that type of company line, if you will. And I personally have seen some, with their staff, some changing with you know, how much they are moving towards decommissioning versus potentially continue operation just in their actions. But they've been very consistent to say that they're really looking towards the state to update energy policies before they'll move.
Gene, you look like you want to say something.
Yes, absolutely. A few observations. If you go out to the PG&E website via YouTube, very interestingly, they have put up a series of very professionally produced videos that show the value of Diablo Canyon Power Plant and its continued operation. So we have this official thing that says, gee, we're just going to follow orders from the state. But we see this interesting development, and some of it is quite recent. They just put up a video about the sea life in the outfall cove and how thriving that marine community is. So I think there are some people that are working. We talk to a number of people. We have a booth at the world famous San Luis Obispo Thursday Farmers Market. And we're very impressed with the number of people from PG&E that come up and say, yeah, you're doing the right thing. Thank you for having your booth here, and thank you for reaching out to the public. The other piece is, if we understand how the state negotiated, and I'll use that term very loosely, how they negotiated the closure agreement, it was really a form of extortion. The State Lands Commission, whose charter in the California State Constitution is to ensure a fair rate of return for assets held in the public trust, i.e., pay the rent if you're going to use something that belongs to everybody in the state. That is the intake and outfall structures. Now, there was a non-alignment between the end of the NRC operating license and the end of the first lease period from the State Lands Commission. And the State Lands Commission was very resistant when PG&E repeatedly went to them and said, bring those two in line with each other. And I believe that what happened was it was kind of like the state, through the Lands Commission, which was substantially exceeding its legislative authority, said, you agree to this or else. And that's why PG&E agreed to this. I call that a form of extortion. Obviously, I'm biased, but this is the problem. We've been able to identify 10 different or 11 different executive branch agencies that have taken actions that are not supportive of the continued safe operation of this plant, which again, I characterize as a national treasure. We've got 39 military bases in this state, more than any other state. And those bases for national security, I think in particular about Vandenberg Air Force Base, are dependent on a supply of reliable electricity 24/7. So,
hey, Gene, we're getting a little far afield.
Yeah, I understand that, but this is just so infuriating to see a state government apply this kind of pressure. So that's
so. Anybody else want to add anything on the PG&E issue? We have several other questioners here in the audience.
Yeah, I'll quickly, Steve. I'll just reiterate that 1245 has made it very clear to PG&E leadership, including the CEO, Patty Poppy, of our position and our interest. So they know.
Thank you.
I had a follow-up question for Hunter on that note. I believe IBEW 1245 was an original signer of the joint proposal, and I know decisions like that aren't made lightly, and considerations change over time, and perhaps that's what happened with IBEW, and I think probably some of the other joint proposal signers, if they had to do it again today, the decision might not have been made. Do you think that, is it possible that IBEW 1245 would come out with a formal statement renouncing their decision to sign the proposal? Because I get the impression that such a move could be something that will swing the needle enough to get other people to join you.
Well, I think I'll start by saying that we issued a statement. My boss did, business manager Bob Dean, and I want to say it was late April, in which he made it absolutely clear that IBEW 1245 was in support of DCPP continuing operations, and outlined many of the reasons. Many of those have been identified in this conversation. In terms of the specified agreement, the issue that we have right now is not that agreement itself. It's the CPUC decision which adopted some of that language, but went beyond that and actually formally made the decision to close Diablo Canyon at the end of the current operating licenses. So that's the issue. That's the decision that we need to reverse. The other agreement formed the basis of that, but it was the formal state action in closing it down is the CPUC decision. And in fact, that process actually went through 3 iterations, including legislation, before it was finalized. So, meaning the CPUC process. So that's the one that we have to fix.
Yeah. I agree. We watched that application morph through time from when it started and when it ended up in a place that was completely different.
So I think, thanks, and we've had some discussions of what has to happen in order to allow Diablo Canyon to continue operation, and they include things such as action by state executive agencies, CPUC, actions by the state legislature, actions by the Nuclear Regulatory Commission to renew the license. I'm not giving a comprehensive list here, but I really liked the way Isabel put it just a little while ago. Yeah, it might be hard, but shutting the plant down and replacing that electricity, that's immensely hard. So let's do the right thing. Yes, go ahead, please.
All right, so I'm Cody Orsak from Idaho National Laboratory. I'll just quickly say, Isabella, just subscribe to your YouTube channel so everybody here can do that as well. But for PG&E, it's economic reasons, so I just wanted to ask about any of the current work or suggestions about what we can do to make nuclear a higher priority on the payload prioritization list, because that seems to be a reason that they've fallen behind according to their economic policies that led to their decisions.
Well, the big thing that we talk about at CGNP is reliability, reliability, reliability. And there is no economic reward through the CAISO for reliability. So it's really a free rider problem. We hope that there is reform that's been talked about in other states. Other states also have zero emission credit programs. So we need some kind of fix that recognizes how incredibly valuable Diablo Canyon really is. And it goes beyond slogans.
Yeah.
And it will take hard work.
Yeah, I'm not exactly sure. Let me just add in that, you know, there's a personal frustration factor for me as a nuclear engineer, a nuclear professional. I come from a state where about half of the electricity is produced by nuclear power. And in this case, vertically integrated utility they run ads all the time about what all they're doing in the realm of solar, because it's also a big solar state. Yeah, they get about 5% of their electricity from solar, but they get over 50% from nuclear, and they don't say anything about it. So, you know, we all got a role in changing the conversation there. And I think we have something, we can all contribute to that, not on just a Californian basis, but countrywide.
Hey, Steve, can I just throw in that the current loading order that the CAISO follows is renewables first, and that was the case back in 2016. But since 2016, a new law which was called SB 100, which created the goal or the objective of California being a clean energy state, changed that prioritization to include all sources of clean energy. In other words, renewable energy as well as non-GHG emitting energy, and that includes Diablo. So that step would help.
Thanks, Honor.
Gail Hauk, Oak Ridge National Lab. First, I want to thank all of you for all of the efforts that you've put into trying to keep these units running. But I wanted to talk too about the broader picture. You know, we've been through this, and a number of you have sat on these types of panels and had these same conversations about different plants. Indian Point, where I started my career, you know, Byron and Braidwood. You know, is Diablo Canyon our last stand where we finally turn the tide and we stop having to have these conversations over and over again? Or do you see that this will continue?
I really hope so. I mean, with Indian Point, everybody knew what the outcome was going to be. And everybody in the nuclear community had been saying for ages, it's going to be fully replaced by natural gas. Yet it went down, shut down, again, fully replaced by natural gas the next day. So that's why in my speech I highlighted the importance of Diablo Canyon politically, because it could serve as an example. It could be the last time we just, like you said, keep having these conversations over and over. And that's why it is so important for everybody to really make their voices heard and just understand that it is not a done deal. We still have time, but the effort has to happen now for it to be, to go forward.
And Jacopo, I don't know if there's something you'd like to say in response to that, because you kind of look at things on a broad basis. Anything you'd like to add about is this the turning point for us?
Well, it could be. I mean, if I look at the past year, I consider it a little bit of an inflection year for nuclear overall, both on the international scene as well as here in the United States. Starting with the frankly surprisingly positive beat from the federal government on nuclear, which I did not expect. And so that provides a context that is hard to ignore. And on the international scene, you know, the concerns about energy security, even the still not done deal about the EU taxonomy, all of that is turning in favor of nuclear. There are a couple of you know, risks that keep me up at night, so to speak. One, there's going to be an event of some type anywhere that will obliterate momentum overnight everywhere for nuclear. The other one is the ability of the industry to sort of deliver new plants here on time and on budget. But as far as saving the existing fleet, I think at this point, studies of all types and the reality of the ugly reality of the states in which plants have shut down should convince people that these are assets and they should be, you know, they should be saved. Is it going to be our last stand? I don't know, but it's going to be a bloody important. It is a very important stand because of the high profile of that plant and that the state is in. So I share Isabel's point.
Thanks, Jacopo, and I'm going to chime in on this one too. Yes, I think this is the last one.
Yes.
Nuclear plants don't have to run forever, and there's reasons why you want to shut them down, but I think this is the last egregious shutdown that we're going to have to get in the trenches and fight. And I just take my hats off to the panelists here. I mean,
Thanks, Steve.
I'm doing a great job.
Yeah,
I'd
I would just throw out there, as far as California being the leader of things, why not lead on this and put this to an end?
And my one-word answer to her is Ukraine. And what Ukraine really is about is energy security.
That's two words.
We have that's a very, very important point, Gene, that is really in the forefront now. We've got one more questioner, and we have time for one more question, so this is going to work out great.
Hi, I'm Shantae Coleman. I work at Lawrence Livermore National Laboratory, and I thank you for all the work that you do to support keeping nuclear power open. I started my career at Fort Calhoun, if you are familiar with that plant, and went through a design basis flood where I worked in licensing for the renewal process during that time, as well as their core design, and worked there until they closed. And so my question to you is, it's great that we're doing this and they may change their mind about keeping it open, but is PG&E ready for this, right? Is there maintenance that haven't been done on the plant because we weren't going to keep it open? Is there core designs that haven't been done because we're not going to keep it open? Are they going to be ready by 2024, to sustain this?
Heather?
Well, you mentioned the core design.
I'm from there. My snippet.
Yeah, specifically the core design. I know the reactor engineer, Jay Lesko, he's great. And we were just in requal a couple weeks ago and learning about the next few outages. A couple cycles near the end are going to be a little shorter. And I was like, Jay, we're going to need the plans, in case we keep running. He's like, I'm going to do those, and I'm going to put them in the Heather folder. So,
right.
Yes, we're ready to go. You're right. We do have a lot of work to do. I think we can do it. There's a lot of questions about PG&E and are they ready? I can't speak for the company, but from what I've seen, there's been a huge shift in messaging. I've been bugging them for 6 years. Like, can we just shift a little bit? Can we say, if the state asked us, we'll be ready to do this? And they're like, no, the decision's made, the decision's final. We're like digging down in this hole deeper and deeper, trying to convince everyone that we've already started decommissioning, basically. But the last couple months, the whole conversation shifted. Mm-hmm. They're like, yes, if the state asks us, we'll be ready. We want to support the state's clean energy future. So I think the company is in a tough situation right now with wildfires. We just came through bankruptcy. We had 4 CEOs in the last 4 years. We have a whole new board of directors. What you were talking about with the initiation of the joint proposal and all the factors that drove PG&E to make this decision, there's a whole bunch of different people in there now, and I'm very hopeful.
That's good news.
Yeah.
So we're coming to a close for our panel discussion. I'll just make first of all, thank you, panelists. You did a great job, and you're doing great work. So let's have a hand for our panelists, please. And I just got to come back one more time to what Isabel said. Yeah, there's stuff we have to do, and there's a lot of things, and yeah, some of them are hard, but what isn't hard that's worthwhile, so let's do it. So thank you, audience, for your attention, and enjoy the lunch break.